Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the This Is Gonna Hurt podcast with Jay Gordon Duncan. And if you're wondering why the J, the answer is I'm not a bagpipe player. And if that joke doesn't make any sense, I encourage you to check out episode 0, where I explain that joke, as well as the purpose of the This Is Gonna Hurt podcast, where we talk about faith, family, fitness, finances, and sometimes fun. Well, friends, thank you so much as always. The very first thing I always do is just thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate it week after week, year after year. You guys have just continued to show up. It's why I do it. I don't even check the numbers most of the time. I just do it because these are things that I want to express, and you guys have showed appreciation for it. So thank you so much. So here I am again on Saturday morning. You actually, guys, have got me cleaned up a little bit again. I did get my run in today, but I had a chance to clean up before I came down and record the episode. And I've been in such a mood of reflection. And as I sat down to record the episode, I had this one topic, like how to avoid the death spiral of marketing, which I'm going to save for later. I think it's a topic that's worth talking about. But then, really, what's been on my mind mostly this week is that we dropped Emma off at college, and my other daughters and very much are in stages of adulthood. Meredith is pursuing her career. Landry just passed her state board for cosmetology, and she's got big plans in the future. And then we dropped Emma off at college. So that's been on my heart. It's been Amy's heart. We're definitely making adjustments. And then as I sat down to record and I did as I prepared for faith, family, fitness, finances, and sometimes fun, I thought, I've not really done a family episode in a long time. Not that you guys need to hear about my family over and over again, but just reflections and things I've learned. I mean, at this stage, I have daughters who are 22, 20, and 18, and in some definition, they're adults. Legally, they're all adults. Healthcare wise, they're all adults. I can't find out anything. In stages of absolute independence. Meredith is just on her own. She's an independent adult at this point in time. Landry, very much so, but she still lives at home while she's getting her career started. And then Emma is an adult in college. And dropping my youngest off at college was really hard. Emma's my buddy. She does lots of things with me. And then, the second night she called having just a really hard time. She's in marching band and they practiced for 14 hours straight, which is insane. And so, she was like, this is really hard. This is not what I thought it would be. And your heart breaks. And so one of the topics that Amy and I discuss a lot is what it's like now that we're parenting adults. And so I sat down and reflect, and I'm going to share 3 things I've learned that now that my children are adults. So 3 lessons that I've learned now that my children are adults. And again, various stages of adulthood. But here they are. So 3 things I've learned now that my children are adults, and I've written them down in no particular order. So number 1, when your children become adults, you don't worry less. You just worry differently. Here's what I'm going to think. I mean, people are like, oh, you guys are just about empty nesters. You're going to have fun. And Amy and I are looking forward to the freedom that we have in the weekends and stuff like that. But, of course, we miss the rhythms of the kids being here. But when your kids are younger and they're in school, your worries are surrounded around making progress, success, teaching them things. Are they making good choices? But when it comes down to it, they still come back home. At least in my household, they did, and I'm still getting time with them. So when they become independent, the worry just becomes different. No control, no say over where they're going and what they're doing practically. How they spend their money, the choices they make, and we're going to talk about all of that in a minute. But the worry doesn't go away just because your kids are adults. It just becomes a different worry. I'm worried a lot less about them falling and bumping their head on a table, and I'm worried much more about car crashes or career decisions. I mean, the worry doesn't become less. And again, I don't encourage you at all to worry. And that's not what I'm promoting here. But as a parent, you just have this general level of like, how my kids doing? Are they doing okay? I mean, if you're a loving, kind parent, like, how are they? And so you have like this concern that's continual. And when they become adults, it just becomes different. It's just you take on concerns and worries that you've never had to think through before. You're no longer, what's the word, safety rising, child safety in your home, more. You're not worried about the corners of the table anymore. Now you're worried about, what are they doing when they're just out living their lives, and you've got to let them do that. So the worry is not less, or the concern is not less. It's just different. And that is a skill for the parent to learn, like how to handle those concerns, because you have the skill set for these certain concerns and worries you have, but they're brand new when they become adults. And so that's where your emotional intelligence as a human being has to adapt. And you can't be obsessed with this concern and worry. If it does, it's going to eat you up and kill you, and you can't take care of your kids anyway. But you've got to learn how to adapt, how to be concerned, and allow them to do those things that you have less control over. And that leads me to number 2, is that you have less control. That also means your kids are just going to make decisions you don't like. So yes, the first one is you don't worry less, you worry differently. Number 2 is you have less control. Your children are going to make decisions that you don't like. When you're at home, you can say, be home at 11. And if they don't come home from 11, then you can be like, okay, I'm going to restrict you or ground you or punish you, whatever word you like to use. And you're going to take the car keys away from them, right? And then go through that whole thing. But when they're out of your house, you don't have, yes, maybe you pay the rent, there are areas, there are levers of control that you might have, but ultimately you don't have any control. You don't have control of what they eat or when they sleep or who they're hanging out with. And if you obsess over those levers of control you have, more than likely you're going to damage your relationship with your child. And again, that's going to increase the worry that I talked about before. So when your children become adults, when my children become adults, you just have to recognize, okay, we've trained them, we've raised them up, they're good kids, we've given them a foundation, we've given them a good, like a faith DNA, we've given them all those things. Now I don't have control anymore. And they're going to make decisions that we just wish were different. And you know what? Sometimes the different decisions they make are actually better. But then sometimes you're like, you did what? Like, it's just, they just do things like, I can't believe you can do this. And, there's that old adage that a teenager can act 3 years up or 3 years down at any point in time. So a 16-year-old can act 19 in a minute, and a 16-year-old can act 13 in a minute. And that is probably consistent for all of us as teenagers. And then when they become 20s, they're forming themselves as an adult. So you just have less control. That means you just have to trust that you've raised them well, trust that you've expressed love. You need to make sure, I'm going to make this recommendation, that your love to them is not conditional. The threats, well, if you do that, you're never coming back here. I mean, guys, I know plenty of people who have taken up that threat and have damaged and lost, relationships with their kids. And so you may do that. You may, really push in on the lever of control you have, but you also got to trust that, you've done the best you can. And if you did not do really well, then you're going to have to make up for it in love and support. Really. But so the first one is you don't worry less, you worry differently. 2, you have less control. Your kids are going to make decisions that you don't approve of. And number 3, the lessons are just harder. The lessons are just harder. And let me explain what I mean by that. It's just, let me explain. For example, one of my daughters took my car and parked somewhere that they knew was at risk for it to be towed. And then they called me late at night, hey, the car got towed. And I'm like, why? What happened? And then they go on to explain the situation. And I'm like, we need to come on home. And tomorrow, you got to pay to get it out. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, this is your fault. And it's going to cost probably around $250. And every day you delay, it's an additional $250. And they're like, that's crazy. I'm like, getting a car towed is very expensive. This is your responsibility and it's your fault. And so we made them pay. So I had to take her out to this middle of nowhere, uh, fenced in dirt lot where my car was. And they paid cash. It was very sketch. And they got the car back and sat down with them. And I'm like, like, we walked through how to make sure this doesn't happen again. But the lessons are harder because as an adult, the consequences of our actions get bigger and bigger. They're almost always financial. Relationships get damaged. There's cars and houses and things we own. And the lessons that our kids learn when they get older, they just get harder and harder. So we could have said, all right, we'll pay half of this tow, we'll pay none of it, thought through all that. And I was like, no, this is going to have to bite and, make sure they don't ever do it again. And so was my child happy with me? No, not at all. But I don't think they're going to do that again. And it will hopefully dissuade them and my other children from ever putting themselves in that situation again. So the lessons just get harder. They have greater consequences. They're more expensive, and lives can be at stake if those mistakes are made. And you, as a parent, I have a parent, have got to wrestle with that and how we teach our children in these difficult lessons becomes harder. And so it's hard to tell your kid you love. You're like, nope, you got to pay for it. Maybe not for you, but for me, I was like, but it was the right decision to make. So those are the 3 lessons I am learning presently with adult kids. They are, you don't worry less, you just worry differently. Number 2, you have less control. Your kids are going to make decisions that you don't like. And number 3, the lessons are more difficult. They're more costly. They're more expensive. They're harder. So I would love to hear from all of you what lessons you're learning as your kids get into adulthood or are already adults. Be helpful for me and love to share it. But as always, I appreciate you guys listening and tuning in every week. And I can't wait to see you again next week. Maybe we'll take up that topic of the avoiding the death spiral of marketing. Who knows? But this has been fun to kind of delve into the family stuff. And we'll talk to you again next week. Thanks so much.